This happened about 10 years ago. My group of friends and I just turned 21, so we were all in the bar hopping and clubbing phrasing for our lives. We would literally go out Thursdays through Sundays and drink and honestly get into drunk and ridiculous situations. On a random Saturday night, the group decided we wanted to go to downtown and hit up for a few bars and clubs. This was a time before Uber and Lyft, so like idiots, we jumped in any available car and drove ourselves there. We parked all in an underground parking garage about 2 blocks away from the strip with all the bars. We had a group about 15 people, half guys and girls. Being 21 and broke, we had a bottle of liquor in the car and we all pre-game to save money. We all got into the club and after about an hour, the girls in the group wanted to go back to the car and drink from the bottle a little more. They asked me to go with them since usually a group of 5 girls walking downtown would attract a lot of creeps and weirdos. I was the only guy that decided to walk the girls back to the car. I live in a very pretty big city and usually you can avoid any bad situation if you knew where you were going. The only bad thing I always hated about going downtown is that every group of people who you usually don't see or run into also goes downtown to party. We finally got the car with a surprisingly no random hazer or annoying drunk person bothering us on the way. We headed underground to where we parked. When we got the car, all of the 5 girls jumped into the car and I ended up the odd person out cause there was no more room for me to sit. I decided I was gonna stand outside and smoke a cigarette while the girls drank. They started blasting the music and talking swings of the bottle with the doors closed. While I was standing outside minding my own business, I heard someone say, "Sup homie, where you're from?" And if you don't know anything about street gangs, it doesn't mean that they are asking you what city you live in, but what gang you're in. When I finally looked up, my heart dropped. There were 5 Hispanic gangbangers walking towards me. I grew up around different gangs, so I can immediately tell they were part of Norteño, street gang by all the red they were wearing. They all had a bottle of beer with them, so I could tell that they were drunk. When the guy who was the obvious leader of the group got closer to me, he asked if I was a member of the Crips gang. It took me a second to realize why he asked me this. I looked down and I realized I was wearing all blue. Literally a blue hat, a blue funnel, and blue shoes. I was just trying to match my clothes and my dumbass didn't realize I dressed myself like a gang member. At this point, I was panicking inside. The bangers had surrounded me and all the girls I was with were all in the car drinking. Even if they did notice what was going on, a part of me really didn't want the girls to come out of the car because of what might possibly happen to them. I was just praying that the girls will see what was going on and someone was calling for help on their phone. I put my hands up and I was trying to defuse the situation and telling them I wasn't a gangbanger and I didn't want any problems. It did not work. The group was so drunk and I could see in their eyes they wanted to hurt me. The leader again asked me, "Are you a Crip?" And I just kept saying no, and without even listening to my answer, he responds with, "Crips put my homie in the wheelchair last month." And I just kept saying, "I'm sorry to hear that, but honestly, I'm not a gangbanger." After a few seconds, he looks me up and down, and he pulls a screwdriver out of his back pocket. When he did this, the rest of the gang did the same thing. I was surrounded by a group of gangbangers with sharp screwdrivers all by myself. I literally thought to myself, this is how I'm going to die. At that moment, my best friend, who was one of the girl in the car, hops out and screams, "Please don't hurt him. He's my brother." She was half El Salvadorian, so she spoke fluent Spanish. She was speaking in Spanish and trying to beg to them not to stab me and convince them I wasn't a gang member. This go on for about a minute, with them not saying anything, just staring at me, and my friend begging them. At that very moment, I hear and see the sirens of a police car pulling into a garage. The gang members saw this and all run to get away from the police as fast as they could. Luckily for me, the girls in the car had seen what was going on the whole time, and was calling the police while I was being surrounded. My friend jumped out of the car to buy something for me when she noticed they pull out the screwdrivers. After everything calmed down, I wasn't in the partying mood and just wanted to go home. My best friend had saved my life with her smart thinking. I will always be forever grateful for her. I kept telling her that she was my guardian angel and she would always just smile. Unfortunately, a few years later, during a camping trip with everyone, my best friend, who saved my life, ended up passing away in a car accident on the way to the campsite. I miss her, and I still honestly feel her presence sometimes when I get into situations that can end up bad for me. I was young, maybe 12, 14 years old at the time. I had several friends who lived in the neighborhood behind mine, and I was a lanky kid, so I would often walk there by myself and walk home by myself. The walkway maybe 10 minutes or so. One day, I was walking to a particular friend's house to spend the night, so I had my backpack. I had made it to pass of the clearing of the small wooded path I take from my neighbor's to hers, when I noticed a large white van. When I walked by, I noticed two men were driving and something about their faces made the hair on my back of my neck stand up. I continued walking, trying to glance every now and again to see if the van had started moving. Much of my dismay, it did. It was slow. This was a residential area after all. I immediately started running after I turned a corner quickly and luckily made it to my friend's house, losing them at the last minute. I was huffing and puffing, and so my friend's dad asked what happened and goes outside to see the van is obviously gone. He tells me I watched too many horror movies and I was probably just overreacting. A couple of days later, I was yet again going to sleep at this friend's house, so I had my backpack. This was in the early 2000s, so I didn't have a cell phone yet. I cleared the same path and noticed the same man in the same van, and immediately they locked eyes with me. I pretty quickly realized I'm not endangered if they have ill intended. They seen me, they know what street I'm walking to, and if they're close enough to me, that if I turn around, I'm confident they'll catch me on foot. I booked it. I had never run my little ascetic ass so fast before. To my horror, the van accelerates and is following me up until I reach the street, at which point the man in the passenger seat flung the door open and started chasing me on foot. He was overweight, so my best chance was to outrun him. I threw my backpack, hoping it would either hit him or trip him, and luckily he stumbled over it long enough to stall him a bit. I made it to my friend's house and her dad called the police. They retrieved my backpack, but the men were gone and unfortunately I didn't catch the license plate. I didn't see them or hear anything about it again, until a few weeks later when we received a letter in the mail from the town police department alerting my parents that one of the registered sex offenders who had moved in years was arrested again for attempting to kidnap another children in the same street. They had attached a photo of the both men, and even their eyes on the paper made my blood run cold. This happened a bit over a year ago, when I was 17, flirting with some friends. One night, we were all drinking and smoking weed in our flat, doing what most teens do. When I decided it was time to go to bed, I collapsed on my bed about 10 p.m., forgetting to close the curtains. Hours later, I woke up facing my window since my bed is alongside my window. Our fence is only about a couple of meters from my window, and next to our house we have an electronics store with a little shed attached to it that is almost right against the fence. Anyways, as I'm lying there, I notice something black on top of the shed. Since I'm half asleep, I assume it's a cat, but as my eyes adjust, I take a longer look. I realize it's too big to be a cat. Suddenly it moves, and I realize it's a person sitting against the wall. I don't think much of it, thinking they're probably having a smoke or something, so I get up and walk out of my room to get a drink of water. Two of my flatmates are still up watching a movie. I tell them that someone is sitting out in the shed. They say I must be imagining it, and I should go to bed. I get my drink, check the time. It's 3 a.m. I must be imagining it. Why would someone be out there at this time? I walk back down the hall to my bedroom, sure that I imagine it, but as I walk into the doorway, I get the shock out of my life. The person has stood and is now standing in my fence directly in the middle of my window, only a few meters away from me. I can see it's a tall skinny man in all black, with a hood on, who stands there motionless, staring at me. I stare back, frozen for a second, before finding my feet and running into a flatmate's room, which is next to mine. Her window and curtain are both open, but I can't still see the man from her window. I wake her up to tell her what's happening. It takes her a while to wake up enough to understand what I'm saying. Finally, she gets what I'm saying, and I ask her to come with me in the back into my room. She agrees, and we slowly peep around the doorway to see the man still standing there in the same spot. We both freak out and run to the launch to tell our other flatmates. They finally believe us. We all follow each other into my room. At first, we can't still see anything. The man is gone. But then I see him. He has walked down the fence and is now standing outside the lounge window. We all stand there staring at him for what seems like an eternity. He doesn't move at all. Finally, one of my flatmates walks over to close the curtains. The second he does, we all hear the man jumping down. We all run outside, but it's too late. He's gone. The next night, I climb up into the shed to see just how much of my room could be seen. And to my horror, you could see everything in my room, clear as day. It still gives me the creep just thinking about how long he was up there and could see me sleeping. We did reported it to the cops, but we never heard anything back. I never want to see this man again.